Okay, good day to you. This will be a recording that will go on we'll go on YouTube, and I will share this with you. Obviously, if you are seeing this, you'll know that I share this with you in the announcements. I did want to give you a chance to at least review a recording of our week 1 Zoom. I'm able to get internet connection now, and I want to go over just a few things with you as it relates to industrial and organizational psychology, a real passion of mine. And we're going to go over a little bit of that. It probably won't be an extremely long presentation. I'm going to do a kind of a PowerPoint presentation. I didn't or wasn't able to invite, I guess, in the interest of time. We're dealing, of course, with Hurricane Irma in South Florida, where I'm at right now. I'm actually in my office. One of my offices, one of the offices that I work at the elementary school that I am a guidance director at. So I'm here at the front desk, kind of keeping the fort down for a little bit. And I took the time here while I have internet connection and electricity. I don't know how long it'll last. I think it'll be okay. I think we're getting out of the woods. Nonetheless, I wanted to go ahead and get this on there in the interest of time. So let me see if I can share screen with us here. And I believe we got it, okay? All righty, let's see. All right, so this is just an introduction. Of course, we're already in week 2, but this would have been what we talked about a little bit in week 1. I think it's nice to review for this course, Industrial and Organizational Psychology. And a lot of it, because that is what my terminal degree is in. My PhD is in organizational psychology, which is essentially the same thing. And people oftentimes will ask me, what does that exactly mean? When they think of psychology, they think of counseling most of the time, or maybe testing, or maybe research in that order, but they typically don't think of industrial and organizational psychology, and sometimes they have a hard time wrapping their mind around it. Maybe you'll come across people who have that as well at a party, or maybe a family member. And there are any number of definitions that would fit. Some of them are very long. I like the definition that we have in this course that we're using, how people are impacted by their organization, and how an organization is impacted by the people that are the employees, as well as the customers and other stakeholders. When in my experience, when I talk about industrial and organizational psychology and people are having a hard time understanding it, and sometimes they kind of get like, what does it mean? What does it mean? They're kind of, really kind of just digging in, to try and get an understanding of what it is, which is, really kind of a compliment. But without them knowing something about the field, it's kind of hard to explain to them. But if I give them this definition, they tend to do okay with that, and they'll say, okay, I kind of get it now. It's how people are impacted by their organization, and how an organization is impacted by its people. We typically think of this for someone's job. How does the job impact someone, and how does people's attitudes and personality impact the job that they're at. So let's see if I can make this go forward. Okay, yeah, okay. So as I said, there are many definitions, but I like the definition that we just had, and that's a working definition, but by no means does it encompass everything. The working definition we have is, as I said, especially useful when trying to explain to someone outside of the field. But, by no means does it begin to cover all the things that are looked at from this field of industrial and organizational psychology, or industrial and organizational psychologist. By no means. One of the things also that is kind of hard to digest in the beginning, and even as a graduate student, I had a little bit of a hard time grasping, is all the different, let me take a step back. Psychology itself, I always talk about the long arm of psychology. We talk about counseling psychology and clinical psychology and school psychology, which is different than educational psychology and family psychology and sports psychology and social psychology and personality psychology. There are so many facets to psychology. And then when you break it down even further to industrial and organizational psychology, even within that discipline, I say there's a long arm of IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology, because the definition that we're working with is a good one, but even someone who has dedicated their life to being an industrial and organizational psychologist is not going to even come near to doing all the things that the discipline or the field encompasses. In fact, if you really are working in the field of IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology, probably you're going to work in one aspect of it, and you're going to become better and better and better at that one aspect of it, and sort of, I won't say neglect or forget, but not be involved in the other aspects. And we're going to talk about some of the other aspects, all the aspects of IO psychology now. So for instance, one of the things that you know by now after going through week one, IO psychologists are part of the team that looks at job analysis. And job analysis in itself covers a lot of things. For instance, job description and what does the job actually entail. To look at a job and analysis, okay. To look at a job and analyze all the things that that job encompasses. You might be a lineman that works for an electric company. Down here we have FP&L. So to someone who is unfamiliar with that field, as I am, maybe I chose a bad example. I see guys, running lines from pole to pole, but there's obviously a lot more that goes with that and a lot more that you need to know to do that. You have to know electricity, you have to know safety, and you have to know climbing and balance and grids and all kinds of things. Let's take something a little, maybe closer to home. Let's say college professor. Okay, so people have in their mind when you hear the term college professor of someone probably standing up in front of a classroom lecturing, but they don't see what goes on behind the scenes of the professor researching curriculum. And then after you research curriculum, or maybe he's even, or she is even written curriculum, then after the curriculum, you have to write the lesson plan, and you have to develop objectives, and you have to conduct your research, and you have to anticipate questions, and you have to manage the class. You have to manage your assignments. You have to manage the feedback you give to the students. You have to keep accurate records and report grades to the registrar. And I'm just even now touching on the surface of things. You have to attend committee meetings, and you have to perhaps be on the committee that is in charge of campus development and campus improvement. And again, this is just barely touching it. So you have to know and be up to date with the technology. So again, that's just a little drop of an idea of what people go through. You have your jobs. And, if you're not doing a particular job, it always looks easy. There's a joke with comedians that goes on about people working, construction on the roads, on the side of the roads. And, wow, like that looks like they're not working at all. That most of the guys are standing around. Obviously something's getting done, because you drive by sometime later, and maybe not quick enough, but some roads have been built. So, there's something else going on there. The other thing that IO psychologists look at is compensation factors. Like, what is, for a company, you want to compensate your employees enough that you're going to get the kind of employee that you want. We had the case study last week with the cashier. So, what am I looking for? How much am I going to have to compensate someone? And say, for instance, an engineer. What is, is it an electrical engineer? Is it a mechanical engineer? I have to look at what they make in the area, and without overcompensating them, understand and know what compensation factors are going to entice the best employees for me. Also, again, with IO psychologists, look at the other things we're getting into now. We have to we're not lawyers by any stretch of the imagination, and most aren't anyway. Some might be, if they got the degrees, if they wanted to go to school that much. But you have to have a good understanding of employment law and legal issues, because you're going to be hired to come in and work on that team, maybe with a lawyer, and understanding the understanding of the law and legal issues is going to be really, really important. A lot of managers don't pay attention to that. A lot of business owners, they count on other people to come in and keep abreast of that. They're busy running their business. They're busy watching their bottom line. They may run afoul of the law if they're not careful. I mean, one of the big things back at the end of last century, in the 1900s, in the last century, was the Americans with Disability Act. Employers never had to consider people with disabilities before. If you were in a wheelchair, that was your tough luck. I don't have to build a ramp. I don't have to be aware of that. Well, a law came along, the Americans with Disability Act, and that changed that. You have to have access for employees as well as customers to get into your building. It's not a good idea. Well, it is a good idea, but it's not just a good idea. It's legal now. You're held accountable, and if you don't adhere to that, you could find yourself in trouble, and it could cost your company money. One of the things I really enjoy doing is interviewing. That's something that IO psychologists get involved with, not just interviewing in the process, but developing interview questions. Again, this lends itself to a lot of areas. When interviewing someone, you have to be very careful not to ask them a question that would be seen as discriminatory. And some of the subtle things that you ask could be, you're allowed to ask an employee or a potential employee candidate, I should say, are you able to, do you have means to make it here on time, 5 days a week? You can't ask them if they own a car. It has nothing to do with it. They might live within walking distance, or they might take public transportation, or they might be in a carpool. So you have to be very careful. Certainly with women or men, asking them about their family obligations. Are you planning to start a family? It's a very nice, conversation piece. It's a nice thing to ask. It's very, congenial and things like that, but it can be seen as discriminatory, because if you say that, it could be a woman or a man, either one. And these days, at one time, we really thought it was women you couldn't ask that question to, because we say, okay, well, they're going to start a family, they're going to get pregnant, and so we don't want to hire them. We're going to hire this guy over here who's not going to get pregnant. Well, we can't do that. We can't base our employment our decision on that. And so interviewing becomes part of that. And then hiring also. How do you go about hiring someone? How do you indoctrinate them into the company? How do you teach them about the company culture? How do you do the training for them? What is going to get them to be on board? You can't just set them at a desk and say, here you go. We can, but it's probably not the most effective way. So the hiring process is also, checking on references is part of that as well. Then IO psychologists get into some other things I really like, which is leadership development. So you have a company, you have an organization, and you have leaders at the top. Maybe you have a CEO and a CFO and a COO. Okay, but what's your plan for succession? An organization that doesn't have a plan for succession is not going to succeed. So while we might have some very strong leadership now, we have to be training others for leadership positions in the organization, and not just leadership positions, but taking on leadership roles in the organization. Everyone, I contend, has a chance to be a leader in some fashion or another. So that's another part of what they do. Also, team building. This goes along with, and I don't have it on any of the slides, but it goes along with establishing and building and cultivating a strong company culture, which we talk about in this course. So part of that is team building. So an IO psychologist might come in, you might have one on staff, or you might hire one. And I should probably go ahead and mention that now. Industrial and organizational psychologists, some companies do hire them, and they don't always call them IO psychologists. Sometimes they're called corporate psychologists. Sometimes they're called organizational development specialists. any number of things like that. But one of the things that they do is they work on team building. This might be something that you might hire an outside consultant for, an outside industrial and organizational psychologist, which is, and I like to do these things. Obviously I teach and I do different things, but I also do some consulting. I have, sort of a little side business, if you will. I don't get to do as much of this as I want because I am so busy with other things, but it's a great thing for an IO psychologist, maybe something you want to look for in the future, to become very good at a particular thing, like team building, and touch base with some of the companies around your community or around the country. As far as I go, I've traveled to other states to do this in the past, and many people do way more than I do. I'm nobody out there. There's a lot of people who really make a nice living with this and do a lot of work with this, but it is a lot of fun. And but anyway, they might contact somebody else, say, hey, listen, we're kind of dragging here, the morale's kind of down, we'd like you to come in and do a team building exercise. And that can be anything from an hour long development, organizational development or professional development exercise, which is rare. Hopefully you get more than an hour. Half a day or a day is probably 80 or 90% of them come into, half a day or a day. Sometimes you'll get 2 days, sometimes you get a weekend, sometimes you get a week. But anyway, doing those kind of things help an organization, and the way to market that is to really talk to the decision maker and show them how it's going to help their bottom line, because that's what they're interested in. I mentioned leadership development already. Team building. I have done that twice. Yeah, team building, I have it on there twice. Okay. So we're going to skip this slide. Something along that goes very well with team building is professional staff development. Now that might come down to leadership development. That might come down to some team building activities, but it also might come down to helping people with time management, which really is energy management, organization, assertiveness, communication, and the list goes on and on, that you can help teams with, help the entire organization with. Sometimes it's good to market that just to the leadership team in an organization, because they will invest in themselves. The smart ones will also invest in their employees. Sometimes they'll want to have you come in to work with them, and then if you really do a good job, then they'll hire you to work with the next step down, maybe the managers or the frontline supervisors. But in any event, to become really good at one particular thing, it would benefit you if you're looking at this, for a career field. And some of you are, some of you aren't. Nonetheless, that's one of the things that IO psychologists do. Finally, we're getting down here. Another thing that unfortunately that they consult with organizations on is managing terminations. You might have an employee who is disgruntled. You might have an employee who's actually making it very hard for other employees in the organization. So you have to sort of, counsel them. That's the other thing I didn't put in the slide. IO psychologists will recommend counseling or counsel certain people if they're having a hard time. Certainly something they're qualified to do. But if things don't work out, how are we going to terminate this employee? How are we going to, tell him? The conventional wisdom says to do it on a Friday afternoon. There has been some other writing in the literature that I've seen recently that says not to do it on a Friday. My belief is continue to do it on a Friday. Gives people, in the case that they are upset, it gives them the weekend to cool off. There's no one there to be, I hate to talk like this, but it happens. We hear the term going postal. Ideally, fewer people there in an organization on the weekend, in many cases, unless it's a retail establishment, for that person to vent on or talk to, if you will. And then, how do we do this? We're going to call this person in the office. He's not going to know, or she's not going to know. They're going to script what the words are, going to say exactly what to say. This is a business decision. depending on the laws of your state, many states are right to work states. So unless a person has a contract or is in a union, it's pretty easy to fire somebody. And you don't want to say anything that could cause you legal trouble down the road. Anything about their gender or their sex or their race or their ethnicity or their religion, anything like that, or that could be implied from someone, a lawyer get a hold of that. So typically something along the lines of, this is a business decision, we have to let you go. We've decided to let you go, this is a business decision. But why? It's a business decision. But I don't understand, what did I do? It's a business decision. Because if you get into what they did, so it gets into a back and forth for one, and there's no winning from the employer's standpoint. It's a business decision. And then you have them walk right out. You say, well, we'll gather your personal belongings at your workstation or your desk or whatever it might be, and we will have them shipped to your house. You can't let them go back in, because in many cases, it's not every case, but the best way and the safest way, especially if you're expecting that it won't go well, is, and then escort them out of the building. You might have to have a security guard or maybe even police, on call, if you will. And then you escort them out of the building, and, you take their badge and their keys right then and there, so that they don't have access to the building anymore. And then the other thing is, what are we going to do to offer them to ease the blow? Because, people will come back and sue for whatever reason, even if they don't have a case. And a lot of times the employer will settle out of court in order to avoid a long drawn out court case with, legal fees and whatnot. And so that, offer, that's why they offer severance packages. We're going to give you 6 months pay, and we're going to pay for your insurance for 6 months. Or we're going to also set you up with a job coach who's going to help you update your resume, and they're going to help you, find your next job, and we're going to give you a good recommendation, because all those things soften the blow and make it easier for the company that has decided to terminate this person. So you have to decide, is it worth it to give him 6 months pay or a year pay, sometimes 2 years pay, in order that, that when they sign, they'll accept that. They're also signing a contract that says that they're not going to sue. They're not going to disparage the company. So it's a give and take. The same thing goes for layoffs and downsizing. So obviously this is just an introductory course. I've touched on some things on the surface. I've gone a little deeper with some other things. Feel free to obviously contact me if you have more, if you have questions or want more information about any of those things. This is a field and a subject that I do like a lot, so I hope I didn't ramble too much. But that is the week 1 Zoom. Hopefully we'll be on for this coming Saturday night as well, and we'll get to do it live. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to stop the recording, and we're going to end the meeting. I pray that you are all well from the hurricane, those in Houston and those in Florida and Georgia and everywhere else, and as well as other things that might be going on. So this is me signing off, and I will see you in the course.